Hi, good afternoon. My name is Susanna Calkins, and I'm an associate professor and the director of the Nexus for Faculty Success, along with my WISH co-chairs, Dr. Lise Elliott and Kristen Burgess, as well as the entire WISH Advisory Committee. I'm delighted to welcome you to this 10th annual WISH Symposium. The annual WISH Symposium and lecture series honors our namesake, Rosalind Franklin, a brilliant biophysicist and role model for women in science and medicine. We launched the symposium in 2016 with keynote speaker Dr. Mahzarin Banaji and the theme Gender Bias Under the Microscope. In the years since, we've explored themes around gender segregation, women's bodies, climate change, and most recently, gender roles in healthcare professions. In this special anniversary year, we are exploring women's leadership under the microscope, a topic advanced by our excellent WISH Advisory Committee. It's me, we've got that. Okay, our advisory committee. If any of you happen to be here, just go ahead and wave. Thank you so much. It's great that you're able, if you're online, give yourself a little applause. And in the room, thank you. And also, I'd like to thank our WISH Planning Committee, who has worked collectively very, very hard to put this event together. And I'd also like to thank our partners in marketing, food for thought, and facilities for making these events so special. Okay, before I introduce today's speaker, I'm honored to first share recorded remarks from Rosalind Franklin, who is the niece of our namesake and an original champion of the WISH Symposium. Rosalind is a trustee emerita of Rosalind Franklin University, and in 2016 was awarded a Doctor of Humane Letters for her contributions to the university. As a certified professional coach, she founded the San Francisco Bay Area Rosalind Franklin Group, which provides organizational and leadership development, topics that deeply align with today's symposium.
Good afternoon. My name is Rosalind Franklin, trustee emerita and namesake of my aunt, Dr. Rosalind Elsie Franklin, for whom this wonderful university is named. I'm honored and grateful for the opportunity to be part of this 10th annual WISH Symposium. I had the privilege of speaking at the inaugural event and congratulate the WISH team and everyone at RFU who have been committed and consistent in their celebration of women in science, while highlighting the disparities and challenges through thoughtful engagement and robust dialogue. Each year, looking at these achievements and challenges through a different lens provides the university and surrounding community rich learning and insight delivered by remarkable scientists and researchers. My Aunt Rosalind would have resonated in many ways with this event, and in others perhaps been a little perturbed by its necessity. She came from a family of highly educated and action-oriented women who paved the way for change and were role models for their unapologetic opinions and the expectation to take advantage of any opportunity available without consideration of gender, culture, or other biases. Rosalind was a scientist who embodied the noblest characteristics of the profession. In addition to a curious and inquiring mind, she was objective, impartial, and accepting of what data delivers. Rosalind exhibited this perfectly in her studies of the double helix. Her magnanimous nature and acceptance of the tested and accurate findings of others was an extraordinary quality. She challenged Watson and Crick in their iterative work, but was wholeheartedly gracious and excited by their discovery, notwithstanding that she was unaware of the theft of her research, which was the basis of the discovery. Rosalind Franklin, University of Medicine and Science, embodies her shared values, a spirit of inquiry, diligence, and academic excellence. It's not about personal gain, but about principles, duty, and being a part of something meaningful, contributing to improving the life of one individual or the whole world, as was her remarkable contribution to the discovery of the secret of life. As society has evolved since my aunt's time, there continues to be a need for shifts in gender norms to support women across all facets of life. Sometimes it requires a vision of true equality and true partnership to show us the possibilities. I'm thinking of a wonderful quote by the husband of a high-ranking career diplomat who said, "Sometimes, for a woman to lean in, a man has to lean out. And sometimes, perhaps now, we end up taking one step back as we regroup to take our 2 steps forward into the future. I think about this often as we seek to change long-held views about courage and confidence. We must all work harder to create the change in gender values and expectations that will lead to more fruitful collaborations and discoveries, nurturing the rich possibilities of every mind, regardless of one's background or social role. These are deep and worthwhile topics of discussion, and I wish the University and Wish Symposium continued success in addressing them. You have opened our eyes to the great potential of women and the challenges that remain to fully realize it. I hope that this important event continues to garner the interest and support it deserves to celebrate and advance women in science and healthcare, where they have long toiled to make a meaningful difference. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Franklin. And now I'm honored to introduce our 10th anniversary Wish Symposium keynote speaker, Ngozi Ezike, MD, President and CEO of Sinai Chicago Health System. Dr. Ezike became President and CEO of Sinai Chicago, Illinois' largest private safety net health system, in June of 2022. Previously, she was the director of the Illinois Department of Public Health, where she valiantly navigated the state through the most difficult waves of the COVID-19 pandemic alongside Governor Pritzker. Dr. Ezike is a board-certified internist and pediatrician, as well as a nationally recognized public health leader. She holds degrees from Harvard University and the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, and a business management certificate from Harvard Business School. She was also awarded honorary doctorates from Dominican University, Knox College, Southern Illinois University, and our own Rosalind Franklin University. She is the recipient of dozens of awards, including Crain's Chicago Business 2024 Women of Note, Crain's Notable Leaders in Healthcare 2023, the Jane Addams Medal of Freedom, and USA Today's inaugural Woman of the Year Award for the state of Illinois. Dr. Ezike's keynote today will be followed by a panel discussion focusing on the new challenges to women's leadership, featuring the Dean of Chicago Medical School, Dr. Chatterjee, Alex Zanowick-Marr, who is a medical student and vice president of our interprofessional community clinic, and Dr. Brian Uzzi, a sociologist and professor of Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. The panel will be moderated by our WISH co-chair, Dr. Lisa Elliott. Now, please help me welcome Dr. Ngozi Ezike as she shares her keynote presentation, Why Me? A Black Woman's Journey in Healthcare Leadership from COVID and Beyond. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I have a phone just to keep a timer. I think I have 35 minutes. Is that right? Okay. So I will keep to that. Without that, then I'd have to wait for someone to tell me it's time to stop. And I used to always say, like, yeah, just do like they do at the Emmys. And by that, I mean, when you play the music, not slap me. So thank you so much. Oh, are we?
That's good.
Okay, are we good? I feel like I'm okay. So thank you so much for having me. I will say that when I was sitting there and they said, we have a message, I know that this, university is on the cutting edge of education and research and innovation. But when you said you had a message from Rosalind Franklin, I was like, whoa, well, I'm really happy to see that it was the knees and not something else. So, okay. But anyway, I am super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I know I got the invite from Dr. Elliott back in June. And I was like, okay, yeah, I think I can probably do it, because she gave me enough lead time. And then I was actually able to be on campus for the first time in July and was able to tell her in person, yes, I graciously accept. And now the date is here, and really, really excited to be a part of this 10th anniversary celebration. And so, I didn't turn it on. And so being able to just kind of talk about my story is super, super easy because I know it, because I've lived it. But I hope that there are things that people here in the audience, people zooming in, can take away as we all continue our journeys. I mean, I think the important thing is to understand that it's a journey, and that you really never finally arrive, because you're constantly evolving. And even when you get to a destination, there's still somewhere to go after that. And so it's just, it's not really about the destination. It is really about the journey. So really honored to share a little bit about my story. I grew up as a child of immigrants. I grew up in the city of Los Angeles, in California, and my parents had come from West Africa. And actually, the story is that when I was 7 months old, and if you're a pediatrician, I was 7 months old and I started walking. And the pediatrician, and my dad always told everybody the story. The pediatrician was like, I've never seen anybody walk at 7 months. Like, that is record breaking. And he essentially prophesied that this girl is going to be very athletic and very smart. And my dad took that and ran. He was like, great, we've got the first doctor in the family. Like, I just always knew, like, from whenever I could remember anything, I was like, what are you going to be? I'm going to be a doctor, and so people think, parental programming doesn't work. It does. I am a doctor because I heard was that I was going to be a doctor. So, and that's not a bad thing, of course. So what led me through was that, parental coaxing, guiding, pressure. But it wasn't till I got to, med school and later that what I wanted started to figure in. But before I get to there, I think that there's an important lesson in there about having appropriate influences in your life, having the right people pouring into you, telling you that you can do things maybe that you didn't even imagine for yourself, but surrounding yourself with the right people. You can't actually choose the family that you're born into, but you can choose the circle that you keep even outside of your family. And I know that that's a very important lesson that has guided me all along. But so I went to schools. My parents, obviously, as immigrants, they were trying to put themselves through school themselves while they were working and supporting, their family, which was a family of 6. But my dad really believed that, his goal in coming here was to get his education. And he thought that education was the key that unlocked all doors. And so we grew up, in South Central LA, not the greatest neighborhood, and the public schools in the area were not strong. And so he invested from an early age to take us out of the neighborhood and give us a really strong parochial education. And we were tremendous beneficiaries of not only my parents' blood, sweat, and tears to try to keep us there, but also the school that provided financial assistance to allow us all to stay in there. Just side note, so fast forward like 30 years, I just went back to LA in June and was able to give the commencement address at my high school, on the 30th or 35th, really old. I'm really old, but on the 35th anniversary of my high school graduation, I was able to pour into the kids that were graduating from my school. And that was an honor. And I was able to establish an endowment in my father's name to help other kids with financial aid. But going through school as a daughter of immigrants, I was the super, and I say I'm tall. Like, I used to always be told I was tall, and I was tall and lanky and awkward. I have 4 kids of my own. And so between my husband and my 4 kids, I'm the shortest person in the house. So everything is relative, right? Theory of relativity. But I was this tall, lanky kid. My mom was obviously African, so she used to do my hair in these kind of braids and different kinds of twists and threaded styles. And I had this name that was impossible to pronounce. And so it was a little scary being different. And so as opposed to wanting to stand out, you kind of wanted to lean back. The teacher would just go through, substitute teacher might go through the name call, he's like, Jimmy John, present, here. And then you would just see the eyes go big and the pause. You're like, I'm present. I'm present. And so but that was, it's funny now, but it was very uncomfortable. Like you were like building up the anxiety, waiting, like, okay, they're on the ends, and then they're gonna, my maiden name starts with an O. And it was like, and it wasn't always as comfortable. And so, that is something that you kind of hold on to. My sister's name is Joy. My brother's name is Obi. And then my little brother, his name, like easily nicknames to Casey. And so I'd be like, what the, I can't short this to anything. So it was difficult. And so growing into the comfort of that is part of the evolution. Getting into medical school, clearly still have the different name, still one of very few Black women in the class, and still having some of those inputs that suggest you are different. I remember one class, actually I was a third year med student, and we're doing internal medicine rotation at the hospital, but at 6:00, like after everybody has done their, closed out their evening rounds, sign out rounds, then there was going to be a professor that was going to come and give a lecture in one of the small auditoriums. So that was at 6 p.m. And I'm that kind of front row seat kind of girl, just because I'm neurodiverse and I'll get distracted if I'm in the back and looking at everybody else. So I sit in the front row and I take notes to kind of stay on cue. And so I did that. I was there on time and I was sitting in the front row, and the professor the doc was doing something where he was just going around the room. So he kind of gave I remember it so vividly. He gave some case, and then he was like, everybody's just going to ask what additional historical questions you need. And I was in the front row, but he passed over me and went to someone else and asked a question, and then asked more questions, and, went around the room, skipped me again, and kept asking questions. And so just the whole lecture, I was just kind of like, okay. And I'm getting hot. I'm feeling it even now, like getting hot and nervous, like trying to figure out, like, what do I do? Am I going to go up to him after the lecture? Like, am I going to say something? Like, what's the next step? And so I was like, I have to say something. I need to speak up for myself. And so, but then other people were coming and asking questions and saying, oh, I really appreciated this. And so I didn't want to do this in front of everybody. So I wanted to just wait for everybody to go. And finally, everybody asked their questions, and he's putting stuff into his like little travel bag. And I said, excuse me, I don't understand why you passed over me in the interactive portion when you were asking for people to ask, to say what additional questions they would ask to help flesh out the history. And he's like, oh, you're one of the medical students? I was like, oh. And so like, I felt it, like, instead of somebody else being ashamed, I felt ashamed. Like, do I really belong here? And so that, I carried that with me, and I went home, and I'm in my apartment alone, and I'm just thinking, this is not really my problem. I need to take it to, and we had we had a dean of minority students. And so I went to the dean the next day, and I shared the encounter, and then they referred me to the dean of the medical school. And before I got to talk to the dean of the medical school, the dean was already telling me, like, don't read too much into this. It was just a simple mistake. And she already had like a book written, the book written by the professor. He had like a textbook, and he signed it, and was like, he already gave me this to give to you. Like, this is not don't read too much into it. It was an honest mistake. And so, those kinds of experiences just continue to reinforce, the who fits in and who's not, and who's on the inside and who's on the outside. And it does kind of cloud some of the thinking. Because I know even as a full-grown attending, working for Cook County Hospital, loving all of the patients that I took care of, even as I transitioned to work in the jail and the detention center, I just loved taking care of the kids in the detention center. I was so hopeful for them, even though they had made wrong turns and they were in custody. I looked at it as an opportunity for them to see something different than maybe they've seen. And, I'd have kids say, how could you be the doctor? You're really a doctor? And I just thought that was those powerful examples and just images that I could serve as. But I also wore my white coat every single day. Like, take one of the 90-degree days, and which docs even necessarily wear a white coat, especially, pediatricians. But I wore it into the facility every single day, because the times that I didn't, I was immediately assumed to be, a mother of one of the detainees, and despite having a badge and, the pass to get in. And so those things continue to affect your behavior, wearing a white coat, even when it's 105 degrees, and try to deal with those pressures while you're actually trying to do the work that you're supposed to be doing. And so I always list these examples because there's a role that people can play to kind of counterbalance that. By looking at the female student that's like the only one in the physics class trying to pursue that PhD in physics, and take the extra step to reach in to counterbalance some of what you must know are the many negative inputs that have also come in. And so I love to do that. I find mentoring as a very important role. When I was able to get the opportunity at IDPH, and people always say, well, tell me how did you set that up to be the director of public health? Okay. So there's, I always tell people, just preparation, just do what you're supposed to do, get your education, work hard, do the right things. But there's a lot of just preparation and opportunity with a lot of luck sprinkled in there. And then the magic happens. I didn't know, I was not politically connected. I didn't know anybody in the governor's office, but someone was aware of me and some of the work that I had done, even in the jail. Like, I started sexually STD clinic, because when I got there, it seemed that within a few days, everybody was writing sick calls that they needed to come in and see the doctor, that they were having either vaginal discharge or burning from their penis. And it was just, I realized there was a very high rate of STIs in these young people that were coming in. And so instead of waiting for people to fill out sick calls and get transported, to the medical clinic, that I created a screening program where that's the first thing that will happen when you come in, that we're going to collect urine from everybody and we'll figure out what people have. If anybody on admission is talking about any symptoms, we would, we would just treat empirically and wait for the results. And so I'd done that. And then we had the H1N1 epidemic, and that went like wildfire, obviously in a congregate setting. That was a huge problem. And as a result of that, I was like, we should have an immunization program. Like, maybe we should have annual flu immunizations happening. Not very popular, but could make the argument why this had to happen, especially in a congregate setting. So we were doing, immunization drives around Halloween, and we'd have to coax and give candy and promise this and do all these extras to try to get the kids and their parents to consent to get. So there were things that people were paying attention to that I was just minding my business. the things that other people that I may not have realized were paying attention to that somehow got me to be on a short list of candidates to be considered for the Director of Public Health for the state of Illinois. So I got a call saying, would you be interested? And I'm like, interested in what, really? And really had to understand, what the role was. And so as I saw all the different programs that IDPH does, I thought, wow, maybe this is a really exciting opportunity to think about health equity and thinking about the programs that are needed for communities all across the state. I mean, I had to learn that how many counties are there in Illinois? Anybody? How many counties?
Dozens.
I don't hear a number.
180.
32, 105, dozens. There are 102 counties in Illinois. I had no idea. I hadn't been anywhere besides like Chicagoland. So like looking at the map and say, oh my gosh, Illinois really goes way down there. I'm from LA, right? So coming to Illinois for my residency was really like my first time in Chicago outside of the interview. So like learning that how big Illinois was and how many counties, that was an opportunity to really understand, the diversity, the tapestry that makes up this state, and understand how one size does not fit all. It doesn't even work in clothes. It doesn't work for anything else either. That really trying to understand, like, it was such a fun time traveling all through the state. And with those 102 counties, there are 97 local health departments. There's some really small counties that share a health department, but there were 97 different health departments that are working to maintain the public health of the state, and understanding some of the complexities and oddities in this place versus that place was just a tremendous learning experience. Whenever I talk to kids, I always say no experience is ever wasted. You never say, well, this is not really what I want to do. I'm waiting to do this. Just give it your all here. You learn all there is to learn there. For sure, no experience is wasted. You will learn something that later you'll be able to pull that back. It was interesting that in the pandemic, we were thinking about all these different settings. It was not usual, but it was perfect that someone who has actually worked in a correctional setting, has dealt with congregate settings, could now help think about the procedures and protocols that would be needed to deal with COVID in the many prisons and jails that we have in the state, because those are very vulnerable populations that also needed to be thought of. And so being able to bring that, like, again, every experience just helps you be a better whatever that is in the future. So I had a wonderful time learning all of Illinois. My initial thing was working, there were some measles cases in my first couple of months. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is a hard job. Not having a clue of what was yet to come. We were, doing press conferences talking about how important it is to stay with your measles vaccines, and yeah, and you know how that goes. But that was just the first step. And then, of course, the global pandemic did hit. We had the second case in the country was here in Illinois. It was someone who had actually, just come back from Wuhan, and so there started that journey, an incredulous journey of building a plane literally as you're trying to fly it, where, people are asking, like, well, how long will this last? And how does this go? And what happens if you take this? You can't Google for the answers, right? We are forming in real time the research and the data that will later be able to populate Google, but we didn't have the answers then. The daily briefings and trying to combine humanity and hope in a very seemingly hopeless situation. Watching the unfortunate interplay of politics and medicine. I'm glad we don't see that anymore. But also understanding the power of partnership. COVID was an all hands on deck. You are working with the school leaders, you are working, you're working with the restaurant leaders, you are working with the business, like you're sitting down at a very large table because everybody needs a seat because this needs everyone. You're working with community organizations that need to get the word out to, hard to reach populations. You have to make sure that you are thinking intentionally about the vulnerable communities because we already know that in any kind of disaster, whether it's fire or flood or a global pandemic, those already vulnerable communities will be hit harder. And what can we do to try to brace them? And so we had equity teams and we had ambassadors all across the state. We had thousands of COVID ambassadors. These are people who willingly volunteered to put our content on their social media, whether it's just to drive conversation or to encourage people to, either wear a mask or get vaccinated or whatever it was. We needed people from all counties, all 102 counties, to try to echo the message. And so partnership is one of the key lessons in leadership. There's an African proverb that I hear a lot of people saying it now. I've been saying it since I was young, but I like to say it's me, but no. If you want to go fast, just go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others. And we all know that's true, that you need to create broad, diverse solutions to complicated problems. And to get those creative, diverse solutions, you've got to have creative, diverse minds at the table. And so everybody shouldn't look the same because then you're not going to get those different ideas. Women have it doesn't even make sense. You have to defend why you need women in leadership, right? We represent half the population. That might be good enough, but we also bring that different body of experience that allows us to create new ideas that maybe some of our better half might be less inclined to come up with. And so thinking about being at IDPH, I think there had been one woman before, like in the 1940s or 50s. And I was able to get the opportunity to lead IDPH at a very critical moment in history, uplifting some of the important values that I had seen from working in Cook County, from working with some of the most poor and vulnerable communities, from working in the jails, also similar poor and vulnerable communities, and thinking about ways to reach some of those hard to reach communities. So when it was time to come out of there, we had to find a place where there was a little lull, where things were calm. I was like, when we get to the point where we can take off the mask, that is my time to jettison out of there, right? And so we finally made the announcement that, the levels were low enough, and so many people, Illinois was one of the most highly vaccinated states in the country. And so with that high vaccination rate, that created some normalcy and people trying to get back to so the goal was to try to take a really long hiatus, maybe write a book, some cool stuff, maybe reconnect with my family. Hi, people, you don't just have to see me on TV anymore. And then this other great opportunity came, and it was to work directly in Chicago with some of the most vulnerable communities, again, on the Southwest side and the west side of Chicago, leading hospitals that take care of this population. There's no break. Let's go. Let's go. This is another incredible opportunity, and I was excited to dig in. Somehow I am a magnet for some of the most challenging work, and I knew that the work would be hard, but couldn't have imagined until I was already in just what it meant to be a true safety net, and the challenges of trying to just give the basics to people in need, people who already have some of the worst health outcomes. How is it that I'm working with equipment that the manufacturer says I cannot come out and fix it? It is too far past usage date. And here we go with there's no money because we take care of 70% Medicaid population. The reimbursement doesn't cover the cost of care, and therefore the resources to upgrade the equipment is not there. How does this make sense? And how are we going to surmount this challenge and try to keep giving the best care possible? And so then again, it just comes where you just have to think out of the box and be super creative and think about things that haven't been done before. So whether that was finding new streams of donors, whether that was going to Northwestern and saying, hey, when you turn over your mammogram machine at 8 years, that's still maybe 10 years younger than what we're using. Why don't we just take that off your hands? And saying, okay, sure. And so thinking of creative ways to be able to solve the problems that will allow us to better serve the community is an ongoing challenge. But through diverse leadership, and I've been committed to finding women and people of different backgrounds, people who are from the community, have been able to do that, to help make sure that our most vulnerable communities get the care they need. The journey continues. The journey continues. We had a recent win in terms of a federal decision that will bring some extra dollars into our health system. And so we're excited to reconfigure and be able to use these dollars to ensure the lasting mission. We want another 106 years. But vision and purpose are key, and keeping focus on the road ahead is so important. We always have to be collaborating, working with others. We have to be humble and maintain our humanity. My kids say, you got to keep it real, right? We've got to always keep it real, but it's also important as a leader to just find balance. The work is always going to be there. When I look at my schedule, I have a 6:30 check-in with my chief transformation officer, but then I'll have a 7:00 weight training session. But then 8:00 is the finance committee meeting, 8 to 10. Like, you can work all day, every day. And I do work 7 days a week, but we have to put in the things that we need to refill our own cup. You can't work out of an empty cup. And so, my assistant has, all the work stuff, but she has all of the games for my kids. And she has the anniversary, for my wedding anniversary. And she has the school homecoming, like all of it is on the work schedule, because I cannot partition myself into 6. Like, it is me. All of that is me. And I'm proud to be able to be a mother and to be a partner and to be a CEO and to be a doctor and to be a sister in Christ. But you have to give yourself space and time to do it. Can't do it all at the same time, but you can work and have the right circle of people that will support you in being the best version of yourself. And so I am grateful for the journey of leadership. I'm grateful that actually men have opened the door for me. And I think Miss Rosalind Franklin said that, maybe sometimes to go lean in, someone else has to lean back. And so as we move forward, we have to think of even how we have to create space for other people, create space for the next generation, keep advancing, supporting and advancing the next generation to know that it can be done and that we should do it. I think it's befitting to end with the words of the first Dr. Rosalind Franklin, the belief that by doing our best, we shall come nearer to success, and that success in our aims, the improvement of the lot of mankind, present and future, is worth attaining. And underscoring that health is at the foundation of improving the lot of mankind and ensuring that we have compassionate people being prepared to go out and serve mankind is very laudable. And I'm proud to be part of the community that is doing that. Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
we probably will have some
Oh,
questions.
sure.
Thank you for your lovely talk. We have 10 minutes for questions. Are there any from the audience in person that we'd like to take first? And then if not, I'm going to look to potentially Brian to let me know if there are any on our Zoom. That's just 1 minute.
Other than your parents influencing you to become a doctor, what else that happened in medical school influenced you to become a doctor?
So once I was already in there, I wasn't really just gonna drop out. I mean, you can, but once I was already in there, it was kind of like, okay, we're doing this, right? But I think the big thing that I got to decide was after I got to residency, I was training at Rush, but as a Rush resident, you got to rotate through county. And so that's my first inroads into the Cook County system and it was night and day. I mean, at Cook County, you had rooms just divided by some cardboard and little shower curtains, but everybody was there, people of all different backgrounds. You would just walk through and just hear all these different languages being spoken. And it did not matter what insurance you had. Everybody was going to get everything that the county had. And so then I was like, okay, Dad may have decided, that I'm going to be a doctor, but I am deciding who I want to be a doctor to. And I committed then that, I want to serve the underserved. And so I was so excited to get my first job and get the job working at county. And so that's where I was able to, use this wonderful gift that I've been able to have.
Great. And then we have some questions from online. And the first one is, this is a series of questions. How important is mentorship in women's leadership? And then how should young women starting up in this field go about receiving this mentorship, especially if they come into the field with no connections? Yeah.
Okay. So how important is mentorship? It's very important. Okay. I still have mentors that I reach out to all the time, and I consider it super critical to my advancement. And I learn something every time. Some of them are formal and some of them are more informal. Some of them are in medicine, some of them are not. And I think having people with other leaders in other fields is also very helpful. But what I also always do is make sure that I have people that I'm mentoring. It serves two things. I'm hoping that I can offer something of substance to the next generation, but it also shows me how far I've come, because it doesn't seem that long ago that I was there. And so being able to just remind myself, even though things are so hard and I'm like, am I even making a difference? talking to people coming up behind me reminds me of the body of work behind me and encourages me, like, you did all that and you can keep going, while also encouraging. So I think everyone can have a mentor. I have never had somebody come up to me, and I speak and I'll talk at commencement, at graduations, and people will say, "Oh my gosh, I really want you to mentor me," or somebody was like, "I need to connect you to my," like, I've never said no to anybody. And I think that's for most leaders, when somebody approaches, you're excited that somebody thinks that you have something that you can offer. And so when people say they don't have anybody, you do. It just means you have to ask, you have to reach out, you have to make the request, you have to ask to be mentored. So nobody has nothing. That's what I'm trying to say, that you don't have to be connected to the governor, but you can be connected to someone at your school or in your residency. And then now their whole connection tree is also yours. So now you are connected, but you have to take that first step and identify those mentors for yourself.
Great. How did you prepare for all those amazing press conferences that you had to do?
I know I used to get asked, like, "Oh, when did you have the media training?" No, I won the 3rd grade poetry recitation competition in 3rd grade. I performed I Cannot Go to School Today by Shel Silverstein. I cannot go to school today, said little Peggy Ann McKay. I had the fever and but I'm just, so that was I guess that was the whole body of my training. But no, I some of us, we have gifts, right? Like, people are endowed with different gifts. It just so happened that I have some gift to be able to speak and to be able to share difficult information in ways that people can understand. And I'm so grateful that my gifts came up at the right time to fill a need that was necessary. So no training. And it was a lot of prayer before every press conference. A lot. Yeah.
Thank you. I love that poem, by the way. I was going to grab another question on it. So we have about 5 more minutes. Great job. I love hearing from you. Your personality is so contagious. So thank you.
Thank you.
Not like COVID.
In a good way, in a non-COVID way.
Question for you. I am in the formerly Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, now we're Community and Campus Outreach. And so I talk to a lot of folks who feel like, maybe they're seeing some things that they don't want to see, or having some difficulties maybe out in rotations. I'm just wondering what advice you might have for up and coming doctors who might be seeing some things on the rotations, like the most challenging parts of humanity, seeing the unhoused and folks who are high and gunshot victims and things like that. How do you stay in your humanity and to keep your compassion and your love for people and wanting to heal them when you're seeing them at their most difficult and at their most worst, so that you don't harden your heart, but open it and continue to want to heal and help, even though it's like they're doing these things to you, like attacking you sometimes in the emergency room, right? How do you keep your heart open? How do you keep your compassion flowing?
Yeah. So I have an easy answer. I think it was just yesterday that I was reading in my favorite book from Ezekiel, like how to make sure that my heart doesn't turn to stone, that it stays fleshy. I follow the tenets that we are called to love everyone, and I know that it can be hard, and hope if you don't already have that going into medicine, I don't think you'll develop that in medicine. It's a little harder, I think, because it's a whole manner of living. And so if people who are coming in with all the biases and hate for different groups, that'd be a little tricky, how you would turn that around in those super stressful situations. But I also believe fully in miracles and feel that, if someone wants I mean, you have to want to change and to have empathy. And if you're intentional that you want to, then it's something that you're talking to yourself. Because I mean, the truth is we all have biases. I have very clear biases, and my kids will tell me every single time. And so, but knowing what they are, then I have to say when I'm walking into a situation that, okay, you know you have this issue, so be aware of this so that you can try to make sure that that is not ruling. And so I think anybody with that intentionality that wants to do better will. And I hope, I don't know how it's done right now in the curriculum in terms of how we encourage that introspection and that reflection in order to identify how you can be a better person, but it's greatly needed, not just in medicine.
Thank you. We had one question over here.
So first of all, thank you for sharing your journey and especially pointing out that no experience is in vain. It all has a purpose. So you're in a room full of women leaders who look like you. What words of advice in terms of staying motivated and encouraged would you share with them?
Yeah, stay motivated and encouraged. I mean, no, I mean, I go to I get invited to a lot of CEO conferences. And I mean, okay, so I'm thinking about, how many years ago in med school, and somebody can't imagine that I'm a med student, but like last year I was at a CEO conference and we are all CEOs and we all have the, institution that we represent, and getting not once, not twice, not three, like a lot of times. And what do you do there? Like all the time. Like, I'm like, this should be a drinking game. Every time somebody asks me this, I'm taking a shot. And then but you have to own what you are, who you are. You have to fight the imposter syndrome, fight all the inputs that are trying to tell you that you don't belong. You have to, like that intentionality that you need to try to overcome your biases. You need that same intentionality to say, I'm a boss lady. I own this. Let's go. Right. And you have to surround yourself with people that are affirming that. My kitchen cabinet is, my roommates from college, right? They've known me. They know what I'm about. It's some of the mentors that I have chosen, some of my sorors, right? Okay. And there are some men, some really important men who have, led me and guided me. So you have to make sure that kitchen cabinet is the right ones to keep affirming you, because there are always days, and I have them still a lot, where you're just like, no, I can't. Like, this is above and beyond me. And I think an important thing to remember is that we don't have to get every decision right. Nobody does. No tennis player hits a winner every time. No, Steph Curry doesn't shoot 3-pointers at 100%. Like, people are going to make mistakes, and we have to give ourselves the space to say that, and I made them too. But it's not about winning or losing. It's winning or learning, and making sure that you always learn from whatever happens and then keep going, because there are plenty of men that have been in leadership that have made mistakes and they stay and get to correct it. We have to be able to give ourselves the grace to do the same.
Thank you for your words of wisdom. We're going to move to our 5-minute break. There will be time for questions after our panel as well. So we will start a 5-minute.
My name is Lise Elliott. I am a co-chair of WISH and a neuroscience professor here at Rosalind Franklin. I got interested in this topic because I studied gender differences in the brain, which are actually pretty modest, and yet have often been used to the detriment of women. So I got interested in these preconceived ideas about gender and race, and how they alter our minds and our social interactions. I'm not a sociologist, but I've become very interested in it, which is why we've invited one of our panelists as a sociologist. And we do have an illustrious panel. In addition to Dr. Ezike, we have our dean of the medical school, Dr. Archana Chatterjee, joining us. Alex Zanowick-Marr, to my right, is a current medical student, one of my current students in the second year, and she's also a leader in our student-run interprofessional community clinic. And then Dr. Brian Uzzi from Northwestern University. He's a sociologist and also a faculty member in the Kellogg School of Management. So I'm going to give a more complete introduction of each of our speakers, except for Dr. Ezike, who you already heard about, as a prelude to each of them to give a little bit of sort of opening remarks. So we're going to start with Dr. Chatterjee, who is the Dean of the Chicago Medical School and Senior Vice President for Medical Affairs at RFU. She's a board-certified pediatric infectious disease specialist, nationally recognized for her research on vaccine development for human papillomavirus and antibiotic resistance. Dr. Chatterjee serves on several national advisory boards and committees, including the FDA Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee, the Association for American Medical Colleges Council of Deans, and the American Board of Pediatrics Subboard on Pediatric Infectious Diseases, which she chairs. She's been dedicated to mentorship throughout her career, including hosting here at RFU other women in the pipeline to become medical school deans, serving as chair of the AAMC group on women in medicine and science, and teaching in the elite ELAM, or executive leadership in academic medicine. So she's really lived this life even before becoming dean here, and has a lot of wisdom to contribute. So I'll let you say a few words.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elliott. A very good afternoon to all of you. I'm delighted to be among this illustrious panel here. Like you, Dr. Ezike, I get invited to speak to a lot of external audiences, so I'm always happy to be here and be able to talk to our own. I've been asked to sort of reflect a little bit on my own career and talk about women in leadership and why that is important, particularly in medicine. So I wanted to share some data with you because we are always data-driven, evidence-based. So as of last year, when the last report was published by the Association of American Medical Colleges, they put out a State of Women report every year. For those of you who don't know that, it doesn't always come out every year, but approximately every year, every other year, you get this report. And according to that report, 27% of the deans of MD granting medical schools in the United States are women. This is, it may sound as though, okay, only 27%, but this is a huge, huge achievement because just a few years ago, you could count the number of women deans on the fingers of one hand. So there has been a tremendous increase in the number of women who are leading medical schools in this country. There's also been a simultaneous increase in other leadership positions that often lead into deanships. So associate dean positions, senior associate dean positions, chair positions. So that pathway, that pipeline is being built, which is really great. And often where it starts is actually in medical school with leaders that are student leaders that go on to be leaders during their residencies and their fellowships. And then when they become faculty members, they remain interested in leadership and go in that direction. So what we've done here at Chicago Medical School is looking around for Dr. Hayward. I don't think he's here in the audience, maybe he's online. But we have actually established a leadership program for our medical students so that they can get engaged and involved in leadership early. And I think that that is really, really important to do, to provide them with the tools and the skills that are necessary to have a career in leadership. I'll stop there and see what other questions people might have for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee. Next, we'll hear from Alexandra Zanowick-Marr. Alex is a second-year student in our Chicago Medical School. She graduated in 2020 from Case Western Reserve with a bachelor's in biochemistry and a master's in public health. While in Cleveland, she partnered with the Diocese of Cleveland's Migration and Refugee Services to develop and implement a novel expressive arts and digital literacy program for unsettled refugees. After college, she worked as a senior research coordinator at Brown University, studying disparities within HIV/AIDS care. Her work continues to center on equity, service, and collective empowerment. At RFU, she serves as the vice president of our student-led interprofessional community clinic, where she seeks to advance community-driven models of care and drive institutional change grounded in justice and public health practice. So we really wanted to open this conversation up to our students and multi-generational, which of course, when you talk about leadership, we need to think about the future. So we're so happy to have you here. Thank you, Al.
I'm happy to be here. Oh, that does work. Okay. So thank you again for the introduction. And I'm very excited to be here for this conversation today. As Dr. Elliott mentioned, my name is Zanowick-Marr. I'm a second-year medical student here at Chicago Medical School, and I'm also the vice president of at our interprofessional community clinic, which is our student-run free clinic here on campus, where I work with the president to oversee multiple specialty panels, as well as work with our peers and faculty to expand care for the uninsured and underserved here in the North Chicago community. So to speak a little bit on my point of view, I think that what makes it a little bit unique is that before going to medical school, and Dr. Elliott also mentioned this, I spent a period of time doing infectious disease research and public health interventions. And I think that that offers a nice dual perspective. I was able to see what leadership looks like as an entry-level professional who's navigating clinical research, in public health, as well as a graduate student who's now stepping into leadership and training. That being the case, the dual perspective, I believe, really highlights the changes that we're seeing between what leadership looks like for different generations. I think that when I was working in the professional field, what I saw was a little bit more traditional. It was a bit hierarchical, endurance-based, and could at times be a little bit siloed. Whereas now, I'm starting to see a shift to one that is more based on collaboration, equity, and accountability to communities. With that being the case, I believe that Gen Z and early professionals, we're stepping into institutions or a world where programs and structures weren't designed for us, and they weren't designed for the diverse patient populations that we want to serve. Because of that, we're less willing to accept, I think, leaders that leaders for their titles or polished statements, and we're more so looking for leaders who value transparency and an alignment between values, mission, and action. With that being the case, just in my experience, having worked in clinics, from that I saw how leadership can shape trust. I saw how when leaders looked like their patients or shared similar backgrounds or lived experiences, patients were able to show up differently. But at the same time, that diversity, it required carrying an additional weight. People were tasked with carrying the weight of diversity and also being expected to prove themselves. So all of that being said, I believe that women's leadership is not necessarily a fixed destination, but more so an evolving practice. My generation, we don't want to use the formulas that we've inherited. We want to reshape them. And we want to center that on wellness, equity, and inclusion. Leadership that's collective as opposed to focused on the individual. So that is the perspective that I'm going to bring today. Not as someone who has all the answers, of course, but as someone who has seen both sides of the journey and who deeply believes that we should work together to make something new and better.
Great, thank you, Alex. And now I'm pleased to introduce Brian Uzzi, who is the Richard L. Thomas Professor of Leadership at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. He's also co-director of Northwestern University Institute on Complex Systems and the Ryan Institute on Complexity, as well as a professor in sociology and the McCormick School of Engineering. His research focuses on the link between social networks and human achievement, including AI and mind and machine partnerships. A member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Uzzi has been awarded over 30 teaching and research prizes on topics ranging from network and computer science to ecology, sociology, and management. And I love this, in his bio, before entering science, Dr. Uzzi worked as a carpenter and musician. Life balance.
Well, hey, good afternoon, everyone. Really an honor to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. I think, from my perspective and seeing the panel, I can't really talk about experiences from a woman's point of view, but I would like to talk about what the research literature has to say, because that's really where I focus my attention. And I would say that, one, leadership is changing in a lot of ways, and it's worth thinking about for women leaders. But the research literature has also changed quite dramatically. I actually got started doing work in graduate school on gender studies of women in science. It's like 30 years ago. And it was a very fun project. It was totally by luck. I was in the right place at the right time. Someone needed a research assistant. And I was at Stony Brook, and we basically went into physics, chemistry, biology, and engineering. And for about 6 months, we interviewed the women and the male faculty. And as you might expect, there was quite a lot of inequality. And most of it was driven by gender stereotypes and women being channeled into one area of science versus the other. And I would say that for like the next 20 years, most of the research on women in science focused just on that, measuring inequality and women work as hard and do the same work as men but get paid less. That's where the research really focused. And I would say I've been very disappointed in that, although this research has shown this kind of result over and over again, it did very little to move it. If you look at something like technology patenting, it's been an incredible increase of women moving into technology and patenting, both in businesses and in universities. And yet women still have somewhere between 14 and 20% difference in their ability to patent. So their patents get turned down a lot more than that. So something else is going on. And I'd say that the reaction to this literature by scientists is showing more inequality just isn't going to help us. And having more and more women change the demography of organizations in science isn't enough either. And the literature has been changing in I would say, the following way. It's moved from thinking about inequality, it's begun to think about, instead of measuring the differences between men and women and their outcomes, measure what happens when you put women and men together and compare that to just men and just women. And then the literature is very powerful in finding new things. So in my group, and other people have done this, we basically went into all recorded history of academic science. We looked at 27 million papers. We measured whether the group was all male or female or some mixture of the two. And what came out of that was really very powerful. For instance, women working with men not only produce papers that are more highly cited, but they're also more innovative. They put together ideas in new and different ways that all male and all female groups don't do. Like, the bottom line is just, look, we're better together. And if we could get that message across, I really think that that is what's going to begin to create more fairness and equity in our lives and around us. I think the other major change that the research is beginning to look at is, hoping for deeply ingrained cultural norms to change is really, really hard. There's so many factors driving it. They move at a glacial speed, and we've all seen this around us. And I think the other way in which people are trying to work with leadership, particularly from a gender point of view and inequality, is to begin to think about what could be changed inside organizations that are under control in order to create better equality and better motivation and bring more women into positions where they can contribute to the organization in a way they haven't been able to do because of other kinds of barriers. So I'll give you an example. In another piece of research we just looked at, we went into the patenting data. We're talking about 6.5 million patents. We looked at men and women either having their patents granted or having them turned down. And we found a remarkable result. And that is a woman or a women's team trying to patent is more likely to be patented if it's a male examiner than a female examiner. In fact, female examiners are tougher on female inventors. And we were really struck by this because it made no sense. It doesn't fit kind of the gender stereotype explanation. And I don't think women are out to get women. So when we looked more deeply into it, we found that, there's things that have been tried that in some ways have essentially backfired in ways we hadn't thought about. We need to put a light on this. And one of the things we found was that women inventors get assigned to women examiners. They're over-assigned, more than you'd expect by chance. And we thought, well, that's interesting. And then what we also found was that because of inequality at the US Patent Office, most women examiners are less experienced than male examiners. And anybody who gets assigned a less experienced examiner is going to have their patent applications turned down more. So the Patent Office thinks it's doing everyone a favor by assigning women to women because that's going to reduce the stereotype. But in fact, behind it all, it wound up creating even a bigger problem. And that's happened in other areas of science. So there was quite a strong movement to make sure that when you submit a paper, you have a balance between male and female authors being cited. You've probably seen this. But what that did was it really backfired on all the people who have names that can't be distinguished by gender. And that's particularly true of Asian researchers. So many of the things we've tried, we're beginning to see now are not working, but we're beginning to understand why they're not working. And I think that is the path forward.
Thank you. And I'll just say as an aside, I spent way too many years battling the movement for single gender education that became a big thing in the mid 2010s. And I got into it because it was based on alleged brain differences, but then it brought me into all the literature on, gender integrated teams and how much more effective they are. And also in a learning environment, you separate boys and girls, and how in the world are they going to achieve this balance as grown-ups if they don't grow up respecting each other as peers? So.
Yes, and I think for people to see it working right in front of them, everybody, if there's one thing that drives human beings, it's like increasing their value of the things around them and their investments. And so when you see that mixed gender teams actually do that, that's probably the best thing to make good, equitable changes.
Great. Well, I have a lot of directions I'd like to go with this panel, but obviously everybody here has experience as a leader or studying leadership, teaching leadership. But I think it's useful to just back out for a moment and ask, and maybe Dr. Ezike can kick us off, is leadership that important, really? I mean, why is leadership important? As people in the trenches, we need good managers. We need to make sure the ship stays afloat. But, as long as the work is getting done and, we push the ship forward, what difference do good leaders really make?
I think we understand that with the right leadership, it's everything, right? And actually very bad leadership is actually very impactful too, but in a negative way. But I think, there's one thing to, keep the ship afloat. I feel like if we follow that analogy, but the leader is needed to make sure that we actually know where we're going, right? And so setting the vision, I think, is what leaders do. setting the culture is part of what a leader will do. And the vision of where you're going and the culture of how we're going to go about it, I think is very important to keeping a team to actually keep the boat afloat, right? Because you can have people that know the work, but they're toxic to work with, that the culture is off. Then you have people jumping off the ship because I can't work in these conditions. So I think setting the vision of where we're trying to go, the culture of how we plan to approach that, I think are at least two very key parts of effective leadership.
Anybody else care to weigh in on that issue?
Well, Dr. Ezike said it beautifully, but one of the ways I have thought about it is that managers want to make sure that things get done right. Leaders decide what are the right things to do.
Dr. Ezike, you described some of your early experiences, and it makes me wonder, have the criteria for successful leadership changed over the last several decades? And you don't necessarily need to answer that if anybody has thought about, and maybe we can take it from the other side of the panel, and then we can come back to the Gen Z perspective on where these changes need to continue to go in the future. So is it a different story now than maybe 30 years ago?
So I'll tell you, I cheated because you sent us the questions ahead of time. I actually did my homework though. I read the questions. I decided to ask AI, what has changed in the criteria for leadership? I got a really good answer because I was like, what has changed? And basically what it said was that the old model of leadership was the command and control style of leadership. And that we have moved into a very different expectation with generational change, with women and people whom we traditionally did not have as leaders now coming into leadership roles, into being much more collaborative, much more empathetic, much more of an environment in which we inspire, encourage, and provide tools to other people to be leaders along with us. I do think that that is a changing scenario. It's not completely changed. And often we will find ourselves, and part of my background, which you did not mention, some of the people in the audience know, is that I actually served in the Army for 5 years. And so when I'm in that kind of milieu, I recognize it very, very quickly as, oh, this is a command and control style leadership situation. Whereas that's not necessarily, as we know, the best form of leadership. And I will tell you, even in the military, outside of combat situations, that style of leadership actually does not work tremendously well.
If I could kick in. So I spend like my days teaching leadership. Okay, I'm at a school that's supposed to teach leadership. So, how do we think about it? I completely agree with what's already been said. The leader needs vision, and that's a very important thing. But basically, if you look out into the world today, there's 3 things a leader has to be able to do. Leader does have to have vision. It's got to be able to spot opportunities and problems early. You got to be able to come up with an innovative solution to make it work and solve the problem. And then you really have to convince other people of the merits of your good ideas. I'm sure you face this a lot in your work. Because if you can't convince people of the merits of your good ideas, all the vision and all the innovative capability goes away. The other way in which it's changed quite substantially is all leadership used to be taught in the following way. You had this presumption that the leader in the room should have like the most panoramic view on a problem, see it from most of its different perspectives. And the way you got people to be able to do that was throughout their career, they go out and they learn more and more areas of expertise. So like, I don't know, maybe you're really good with the numbers, but not so good at keeping a present mind in a difficult situation. You go out and do that. Maybe you're really good at giving good hard-fisted feedback. Ironically, you're not such a good listener. You don't need to. All of that is just simply not possible anymore. And the reason for that is, especially in this room, you'll appreciate it. Every area that you used to be able to gain expertise in is now growing so fast that you basically have to spend all your discretionary time just keeping up with a single body of knowledge. In your profession 5 years ago, 800,000 papers were written on the planet in medicine. Last year, 1.2 million. And next year, it's going to be 1.3. 5 years from now, it's going to be 2 million. You just can't keep up. The way you teach a leader to solve this problem is it's like you've got to realize leadership is not really about you. It's really about your ability to collaborate, a word you used, with a network of people that kind of fill in all your blind spots so that you have vision. You've got the creative material to come up with something innovative. That's the real secret.
Since I've got you on the mic and you do teach leadership, I'm curious if Kellogg or in any of these programs, there's a different touch that you use with aspiring women versus aspiring men leaderships. Do you see, because honestly, in 10 years of WISH Symposium, we've had not enough men on our panels. And so often we're just kind of preaching to the choir. So I think it's really a great opportunity here to hear from the male perspective on women's leadership and its strengths and weaknesses. And, is there a different formula or do we just need to step up and be like men?
Yeah, so again, the answer to that is no. Because women do face different barriers and different constraints than men do in the workplace today still. Where it's similar is you really want a network of connections that kind of, like, as I mentioned, fill in your blind spots. That means you've got to have a diverse set of contacts. And men tend to have more diverse contacts than women in their networks, which gives them an edge. The other thing is that women's networks tend to be more closed than men's networks. So like, if I were to ask you, like, how many people do you go to for professional advice? And you're like, 10 people. Maybe 8 of those 10 also go to each other. And that would be typical for women. But for men, that number is more like 5 out of 10. So you don't have this kind of closure. Because when you have the closure, that's when you get into like an echo chamber, which is what you don't want as a leader. That's like, you could be like super smart, but collectively dumb. You want to stay away from that. So one of the things that we see is that women, that people who have these better networks, as I've been describing them, whether they're men or women, do better. But women need an additional thing still today, and that is they need to make sure that they have other women in their network. And like a man can have an all-woman network or an all-man network, and they still do pretty well, but women need to have diversity in terms of the gender of their contacts. Because that's where you kind of get like the inside information to understand how to navigate a world as a woman. So yes, there are some differences, but the basic idea is still the same. You really want that network because that's the foundation.
Thank you. I do want to get Alex's perspective on some of this. And it seems to me that leadership is a whole different story with your generation, the social media generation, where, people pop up kind of out of nowhere and suddenly are influencers, are leaders. It's not the traditional pathways to get credentialed. And do you think that is impacting your generation? I guess, how does that impact your vision of maybe your future career or the future of healthcare?
I think that my generation has grown up in a space where we're constantly visible and scrutinized. And I think that, yes, we're seeing a lot of people pop up, gain popularity, attain leadership positions, and sometimes they're not people who should not be in leadership positions or are informed enough to be making judgment on certain things. But social media lends itself in allowing people to, distribute information quickly and whatnot, and it can complicate things even further. But one of the things that I think that is important to touch on with media and women constantly, I guess being under the microscope, to go off there, but an important aspect of this, I think, is how women and also other marginalized communities are judged or interpreted. Our work is often, or actions are often looked at, and they say something about our identity as opposed to the work that we're doing. It's less so with men. It'll be a bit more about what it is the work that they're doing, the quality of the deliverables, so forth. But with women, it's their identity, it's who they are, their character, their appearance. And I think that social media can amplify this. And so while it also lends itself to, it can be an incredible platform for reaching people, but I think that it can also amplify the judgment and stereotypes and almost unobtainable image that we are held against. So it definitely makes it, at least speaking from the Gen Z perspective, difficult to navigate.
Yeah, I guess what I'm dawning on me is I'm wondering if somebody of your generation can even attain leadership without having a significant social media following. And, is that yet another hurdle that you feel is imposed?
Yeah, I actually, and it's really interesting. I've been noticing a lot of my friends as they go through medical school or graduate from their professional programs. Quite a few of them will, save their @doctor whatever handle on Twitter or on social media just to start building up medical education. I think that there are expectations for physicians now. We're not just physicians, we're physician allies, we're physician XYZ. We need to fulfill more roles because the role of the physician goes far beyond the walls of the clinic. And because of that, I think that social media is almost integral. If we want to, I think, make changes, which is what I believe my generation is really driven to do, it starts with behavioral changes. It starts with reaching them outside the clinic walls and being with them there wherever they are. And so I think that I'm seeing a big push towards using social media to increase education, to help with preventative care, and so forth.
So in other words, it's an essential tool. And so, it's just something you got to master along with everything else, like neuroanatomy. Just joke. I wanted to turn back to Dr. Ezike. You gave a very personal talk, and I really appreciate you sharing so much. But this is a symposium about women's leadership, but really what stood out to me is that I think your experience as a Black person was probably more, more of these challenging moments happened because of race than because of gender. And I don't know if you're comfortable talking about how those two aspects weigh, or what you think. I mean, particularly in a field like public health, there are a lot more women in that. And so maybe we're down the wrong pathway here in our conversation.
Well, I mean, so it's the double whammy, I guess. You're Black and you are a woman. No, I'm very happy to be both. But I think you always have to be careful when you ascribe intent to somebody else's action, because I'm technically not in your brain to know what you're doing, even though I can kind of guess. But I think being in the milieu where what prevailing biases and tendencies are, you can try to extract. So I think there definitely are. I think it combines, right? It's I'd like to just say it's my youthful looks. Couldn't think I'm old enough to be a CEO. But, really, I think when you look around the room, there are very few women and there are even fewer Black people. So the combo then becomes like, this can't be, So it's definitely the confluence. Yeah, I don't know, because I've never been a Black man.
There are actually studies that have been done to ask women of color whether they feel that their gender or their race and ethnicity has the bigger impact. And in all those studies, it's very, very clear that the women perceive their race and ethnicity as being much more impactful in how they're viewed by society. This is particularly true in this country. Now, I'm not enough of a scholar to know whether that is true in other mixed societies, but at least in this country, that seems to be the case. I don't know if you have additional insights on that.
I do not. If you want to find out more, it's called intersectionality, and you can find out what the literature says on it. It's not on there.
Thank you. I know that that's a challenging topic. I want to come back to the title of this panel, which is the new challenges to women's leadership. And so when our committee decided to focus on women's leadership, it's because there's a sense that we are, after 3 presidential elections, and the only 2 women to ever run for president, lost, highly qualified women lost.
They're not the only 2 women to run.
From major parties.
In recent history, yes.
From major parties. Anyway, it does feel like we are in a backlash moment, and it's feeling pretty bleak. And I'm just wondering if anyone in this panel has noticed it within their institutions. Is it just something we're imagining, or is this, just another decade we're going to have to push through in order to get back to where we were before?
So I'll try and start. A lot has been written, talked about, said regarding the glass ceiling, right? And there have been a lot of cracks in that glass ceiling. I think Hillary Clinton actually made reference to this, to say, haven't broken through yet. But the fact that we are making those cracks, eventually that will happen. It is simply a matter of time. And some of us are not patient enough to wait that time that it will take to get there. But there's no question in my mind that the barriers that women face in leadership, whether it is in our field or in other fields, are real. Some of them are long-standing, some of them are new. One of the newer things that we are hearing and seeing is the belief that women get more opportunities than men do, that they simply are unable to overcome those barriers because they're not good enough, they don't try enough, they don't care enough. There's all these tropes out there, none of which are true as it happens. But they're out there, and those are things that we have to face on a day-to-day basis, and we have to counteract that and respond to that many men who are in leadership positions simply are completely unaware, actually, that those things even exist.
Well, I think we've got a very lively audience, and we did want to save time for more questions from the audience, either in person or if there's any who wants to read online. So please, we welcome your questions. I know there were some we didn't have time for before, if you just want to continue from Dr. Ezike's talk. Anything? Okay.
Hi, my name is Aaliyah. I'm part of the PMP program here, and I wanted to ask Dr. Ezike, how being from a family of West African immigrants as well, and not really knowing the path sort of to how to get to where you are now, how did you overcome things that when you didn't know what's the next step or how can I go about, doing this if something falls short?
Well, thank you. It is, it can be scary to try to chart, uncharted waters. Applying to colleges in the States, that process was, my parents just went to the local, junior college and just signed up there, and then, just transferred to the nearest, public institution that's nearby. But you have to rely on that community. And fortunately, I had good guidance counselors at schools, which, that doesn't always work out, because I definitely have heard people similar who've been discouraged instead of encouraged. But I think that's where there's a kind of upside to the social media, that so much information is out there about how to do things. Like, I have a 16-year-old who has decided she's going to be a dermatologist. I'm like, okay, I'll take it. And she has, because she's never talked to me. She came to me with this full-fledged plan of how she was going to do dermatology, how NYU had a program that you get into med school and then you're guaranteed a spot in your dermatology residency. And so that's what she wants to do, and that she needs to start doing research. And I'm like, who are you talking to? Like, you never talked to me about going, I thought you were going to be a lawyer. So, but she was like, oh, I did my research, and so so there are a lot of tools that are available, which, before social media, like it's your circle and what you see and what somebody tells you, what's at school. But I really feel like there's so much at our fingertips now that you can try to chart a course, even not having people in your immediate family that have gone before you, but you can also search out people. I mean, some of the things that my daughter was looking at, if somebody was like, I'm a derm resident now, and this is my journey, and so she is like, and she's taking notes of these different people. So I think there's a lot out there. And then if you don't find it, then go search out people, because people, even who don't know you, will try to help.
Yeah. Any other audience questions?
Do you want you to go first? No, go.
Thank you. So, my question is for you. I think I'm a millennial, and I feel like millennials probably faced some of the things that Gen Z is facing. We didn't grow up on social media, but we got it when we were really young. And I think that generations are fascinating to me because they reflect history and current events and climate and environment, and all of those things shape what a generation is made of. And social media shapes who we are in terms of the algorithm sort of reinforcing our own ideas, or our bubble of ideas with the things that we swipe on quickly, or the things that we swipe on slower, we spend more time. So all that is to set up the changes that you want to make and that your generation wants to make in a system that wasn't built for you. And I think a system that we could argue wasn't built for maybe the majority of the people sitting in this room. How do you build on what's already been done to make those changes? Or is there anything to build on? Or is it, let's just start from scratch?
That's what we're trying to figure out. So, and also I'm on cusp, so I have like a little bit of millennial in me. No, that's the really difficult question here. And I would say just Gen Z in general, I think, is a very social justice driven generation, right? And I think that a lot of us come from families that have sacrificed everything to create opportunities for us. And we don't want to accept the inequities that we're seeing are persisting. And so I think that we see leadership and we value leadership that is collective. We don't want one singular leader. And I think social media lends itself to that. I think that kind of like bringing in that aspect of it, it gives us a new tool to potentially reshape what this looks like from the inside. But that being the case, I'm not sure what it's going to take. I think that's the goal. One of my favorite quotes by Dr. Edward Deming is, a system is perfectly designed to get the results that it does. And if the result is inequity, then inequity is in the design. And so I think that we are really tasked with, and I believe that we might have mentioned before, dismantling and taking apart a system, it takes a lot of time to make those changes. So I think that now that we're equipped with new tools, a lot that we've discussed today, we're looking at, do we actually need to take it apart, or can we make changes and tweak things to actually reestablish equity and diversity using within the system that we currently have? So to be determined.
Thanks, Alex. I think we had a couple questions over this way.
I'm willing to defer. Thanks. It's been a great panel so far. Until this question. No. So, there's some of you mentioned some ideas that we sometimes might call leading with cultural humility or leading with intellectual humility. This idea that I come into a space where I don't know everything. I don't know everything about you. I don't know everything about an answer. And, while we might say, sure, it's okay to say, I don't know, but how often do you feel that you can say, I don't know, without being questioned about your leadership or the ability to lead? And because you talk so much, we all talk about, we hope that people will be respectful listeners, collaborative, but I'm wondering if there's any way that sometimes that can be seen as a downside if people are not knowing everything as they go. That's for everybody.
No, that's a great question. I remember with one of my mentors, I was in the job and I was saying, I've been doing this for a while and I feel like I can do it in my sleep. Even if I'm on call, I know every possible scenario of what's going to come up and I can rattle out what to do and go right back to sleep. I'm probably not being challenged. I'm not really pushing the envelope. And so when I was thinking about when I actually was offered the job to go to the Department of Public Health, I was talking to this same mentor that's reminding me that, remember those years ago when you said you wanted a job that, you were going to be working with different people that had maybe that you weren't the smartest person in the room, that you didn't know everything about everything, that you would have to learn, but you would get to use, your smarts, your curiosity, and just your, intellectual questioning, and that would get to carry you. Like that, this sounds like it. I was like, and so I think, I had to walk into IDPH, not coming from one of the 97 local health departments, not coming from the state health department and running different programs and then, here's a logical progression, but coming in as a complete outsider. And so I had nothing but humility because I needed them to understand that I knew they were the experts and that I saw my role as, coalescing, harnessing that wisdom to get us where we were trying to go. And thankfully, I had a full year of showing who I was as someone who, there's something where you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should talk half as much as you listen, listen twice as much as you talk. And so I wasn't, and there are people who are just the opposite. I'm going to be heard in every meeting and I'm going to speak just because I haven't spoken in a while. And you're like, you don't have anything to say, like what? So I was very quiet and I would let people talk and I'd be taking copious notes but I know I'm smart. So I know that as I get the inputs with that, I can go do what I need to do. And so having a year of people understanding that I respect what you bring to the table and I'm listening to you and I think you have the answers and I'm going to listen to what you think are the best answers and I'm going to use, the resources we have to move forward. that gave me so much good standing with these local health department leaders that when the crisis came, they were ready to follow my lead. But they knew that my leadership came from using what they had given me. And so I am grateful that the timing worked out like that, because I think it would be a little tricky if you walked in the door and were facing crisis with people who didn't understand your style, didn't know that you were here to listen. But I know there were people at the beginning like, what's she doing here? I had people told me, they're like, she said that and he said that. But within a year, we were all on the same page. To this day, people tell me the amount of regard and how I'm still regarded because of the approach of bringing the humility and then bringing people's strengths together. So I think people appreciate that style. I think we're past the days where you just want to show I'm the know-it-all. I know everything. I don't think anybody is looking for that anymore. So I came up as a leader in the right time, because if we were in the time where it's like just command and control, I know everything, you go do this, you go do this, I wouldn't have been successful in that mode. So luckily it worked out.
All right, well, we have a question from online. For Alex, what kinds of practices can current experienced leaders in medicine do to help encourage and support young women in stepping into leadership roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that a big thing here, and what I'm seeing, at least from my experience, is that we need, of course, mentorship, but we also need sponsorship. And to kind of differentiate the meaning between that and what I'm going on with that is with mentorship, it's guidance. It's you passing down your knowledge, your experiences, whatever that may be. But with sponsorship, it's using your capital, your resources to kind of open doors for your mentee. And I think that mentorship without sponsorship, unfortunately, sees a bottleneck. There's only so far that you can go, and both are necessary. So that is specifically one that I think is very important, making sure that there's a balance between the mentorship and sponsorship that you're doing, and helping to open doors for your mentees and women looking to go into leadership.
Thank you. We are out of time for questions, so I'm going to turn it back over to Lise.
Yeah, well, I want to just thank everybody for joining us today, our audience, with your great questions. It's been 10 years and we appreciate your loyalty. We've had a great cohort that's followed the WISH Symposium. Of course, I want to thank our team. We're hovering around or online, Brian Rausch and Jay Moat, who's online, and Amy Hilsey. Where's Amy? Patty Bender. Where's Patty? Anyway, we couldn't do it without them. A lot of organization. And then, of course, our panel. What a great, diverse group of perspectives. And finally, I was going to say this by way of introduction, but I want to, of course, especially thank Dr. Ezike for joining us today. And I wanted to tell you how starstruck I was to first meet you. You were such an inspiring, comforting figure during COVID. And so thank you all again. Have a great rest of your day.